Tierra es como tu cuerpo, vela por los ciclos que a tus hijos sostendrán. Escucha tu cuerpo, detente un momento y así a la tierra y a tus hijos cuidarás.
Singing is something that I have been passionate about since I was little. But this part of me was forgotten. I had not realized how much the lack of singing was affecting me until I went into crisis in December 2011. I was torn in pieces. After I was fired from 3 jobs, my digestive health was on the floor. Most of the food gave me indigestion. And I was about to marry a man. We had done the impossible to be together. I converted to his religion. He came to live in Colombia to be together. And we loved each other. But the sad reality was that we did not get along. The relationship was chaotic. Yet, we were stubborn. We insisted and set a date for the wedding and sent out invitations. And abruptly, after a terrible fight where we brought out the worst in each other, the wedding was canceled. And this generated a huge breakdown for me. Everything went out of control. I was sick of life and totally undone. I couldn't believe I had gotten to this point. I no longer trusted myself and my decisions. In other words, I hit rock bottom. I concluded that I had been chasing someone else's ideal of achievement and success, which made me lose myself. But how could that happen if I was very clear about what I wanted to do when I was 20? Now I'm more than 40. I was clear on my goals, that I wanted to be a creative woman, and was not pursuing a conventional ideal of success. Well, I met a religious leader who warned me at that time that although in our youth we have idealism and clarity of who we are, in the world there is a force that she calls the undertow, which drags us under without us realizing it. A force that favors a culture of consumption, accumulation, and competition that grabs us and makes us its slaves. Faced with this undertow, the tendency is not to even realize that it exists and to flow naively, or on the contrary, to try to control everything. Some people say, just go with the flow, just flow with the circumstances, and others tell you, take control of your life, and they're obsessed with calculating every last detail. I tried both, and neither worked for me. Flowing with the circumstances led me to live in automatic, repeating the same story over and over again of failure in various areas of my life, and it led me to failed relationships, jobs, because I had unconsciously adopted other people's dreams. I call them borrowed dreams, which were not mine. It's like the Julia Roberts story in the movie Runaway Bride, when she became whatever her suitors wanted her to be until they proposed to her. She became the hippie, the intellectual, the jock, whatever. She had no identity of her own. Over and over, she would come down the aisle with the wrong person, panic, and run away. It seems absurd, but it is easier than you think to betray yourself for love, money, or recognition. And this amounts to becoming like a zombie, numb and without identity. The other side of the coin is the hyper-control and rationality, taking advantage of all situations like Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, hungry for more and more, never satisfied. This leads to becoming like a vampire, sucking utility out of every situation. I fell for this too, perfecting a plan which led me to meet other people's standards of success, but a huge cost to my digestive system and left me feeling exhausted. Something new had to guide me, something different that would reconnect me with my creativity, with my life force, my intuition. And I had this before. I call this succulence, but it was gone. It had disappeared. How do I get this back? Around that time, I reread an extraordinary book for the third time, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And rereading the first story about the bone woman gave me answers. The bone woman goes all over the desert, collecting bones, putting them together in a bag. And then she sits in front of a campfire and assembles those bones until she has a complete skeleton. She starts to sing, and the skeleton comes to life. It is a wild animal that, when recognized and celebrated, runs free. I reflected. And I understood that the bones are all those parts of me that I abandoned or left behind in the desert of oblivion, like singing. Forgetting was partly due to the mess in my life. I was nauseous. It was nauseating from so many scattered undigested things that I had lived through. And as I began to organize my space, throw things away, I discovered what I truly wanted: reconnect with my bones. Those forgotten parts began to appear before me as a series of relics or sacred creations that I had buried. I started collecting these relics. For example, 39 journals in boxes, 10 songs I had written in my music notebooks, my college thesis on eco-villages that had been a huge revelation, and many others. And when I had all these relics in front of me, as in the story of the bone woman, something awoke inside of me. It was my wild animal. The Greeks call him the daemon, and he is our inner genius. Guardian of talents, pure vital energy. We all have it. The new energy from the daemon gave me the impetus I needed to undertake this path of recreating, reinventing, and recomposing myself. I started writing. I started following a series of steps very intuitively, where the first was to collect those bones. And then I started listening to my daemon. This being speaks to you. At first, he spoke to me in metaphors. He gave me a new twist to the story of the bone woman. He told me it doesn't end there. The daemon showed me that in his fur, he had some seeds that had to be collected and appreciated in daylight. Then some strong evening winds blew away the seeds, and they take flight and go on a journey to new territories where they are sown, and from there new fruits germinate. Little by little, I began to understand that each step of the story means something, which I will tell you. What are the seeds? What are the winds? What are the territories? What are the fruits? Before I understood anything, he threw me some very precise instructions, and I followed them, no matter how absurd. How about this? He ordered me to read my 39 journals. Can you imagine that? It took me a whole year, page by page, journal by journal. It was quite a pilgrimage of self-discovery. I hardly left the house. I spent New Year's 2013 all alone, reading like a hermit. And then, reading these journals reconnected me to my stories. A lot of stories that reminded me who I was, my essence, my internal DNA, similar to a seed. That's when I understood the first symbol, seeds. They are essential stories because they carry our essence, showing us who we really are. Reading them was fun. Every so often I would say, that certainly sounds like me, even if I had forgotten the story. For example, the story of singing on the school bus. Like the school diva, if you will. A simple story, but very meaningful to me. Here it is. A primary school teacher taught me some Colombian songs, and she brought me closer to my own culture through music, which was an oasis among the French education I was receiving. I strongly resonated with this class, and I clung to these songs like a lifeline. I learned them by heart and couldn't find a better project than to teach them to my best friend on the school bus. My friend was not particularly musical. She was actually a great athlete, but she cooperated with my project. Years later, she told me, well, you have to go along with the crazy people. And we all have something crazy. Our daemon is actually pretty weird and bizarre. At the same time, it is what makes us unique and gives us our drive and our passion. In this story, you can see my passion for music, for learning and teaching, for sharing, for inspiring. So much so that when I released my first music album, another instruction that came from my daemon some years later, the first donor of my crowdfunding campaign was a classmate from school who said, "I will never forget you singing at the top of your lungs on the school bus." These stories or seeds are medicine, and I was self-medicating. There is an African tribe, the Babemba, that has a very wise practice connected to the seeds. When someone loses his way or commits a crime, instead of punishing or isolating the person, the elders bring together his closest tribes to retell this person's essential stories. This way, they remind them of who they are. They then reconnect with themselves and rectify their path, and this happens over and over. This is what was happening as I reread my journals. I was reconnecting with myself. I was giving myself that medicine from the stories, collecting my own seeds. And a good story has its challenges and difficulties. They challenge the image that everything is just great. I am Wonder Woman, a mask that I have used frequently. I realized that there were unresolved stories, grief that I needed to face. I also saw I could define how my stories evolve, just as a daemon gave me a new twist to the story of the Bone Woman. All the stories, as painful as they are, have the potential for transformation. You defined what the end of the story is, if there is one. An ending that gives meaning to whatever we have experienced. That is why stories are like seeds, because they germinate and grow, have new twists, and they're alive. It's like the story of the punch I gave Malden. I found a terrible story of hitting a schoolmate named Malden in a U.S. public school for bullying me. And well, it's okay to defend yourself, but clearly, tit for tat leads to endless violence. Remembering this, I felt ashamed. I had gone too far. That day, I was possessed by anger. Not only did I hit him, but I destroyed all his school notebooks. I decided that the end of the story is not that destructive act that I committed, but the journey of transformation that this led me to, of self-knowledge, self-regulation, and that to get involved eventually in issues of peace, forgiveness, and reconciliation, so alive today in my country, Colombia. It helped me to see perpetrators with compassion. Instead of seeing them as the bad guy, realizing that I myself had been in a position of seeking revenge and violence, I understood that the solution is not to blame or to punish, but it's healing and transformation. I saw that my stories are driven by forces within a broader context. These are the wins. Part of why I was so lost and that I had disconnected from what really moves me, my wins, is that I had completely cut off from all the great influences that I had been inspired by in my 20s. And I had consciously been carried over by this undertow. I allowed myself to be propelled by the wrong winds, the counter winds. But there are life-giving winds. These winds are the true causes or ideals that have driven me because I have chosen them, as they resonate with something deep inside of me. For me, these winds are the transformation of people, the awakening of soul and the feminine, caring for our ecology, declaring ourselves as change agents at this time of crisis. Tuning into these winds gave me a sense of direction. I was no longer so lost. These winds were taking me to new territories. The territories are where we plant our seeds and grow, where we do our best work and leave our legacy. It is where we begin to feel a sense of belonging, of being part of a tribe with a common purpose. Instead of being isolated and uprooted, which is the perfect broth to become zombies or vampires. It was not easy for me to find my territories. In fact, studies estimate that around 70% of people do not work or dedicate themselves to what they study. I studied biology, environmental management, and business administration. All fascinating subjects, but work that I did not feel totally passionate about. I had a hard time understanding and accepting that in the end, I didn't want to work in these topics. It took me actually 20 years to find my true territories. They are the actual proper habitat for my daemon, for my talents. It's where I recuperate my succulents. And these territories are music. I need to be singing and composing. Human and organizational development. Now I know that I need to be growing and supporting others in their transformation. Social innovation. I need to feel that my work contributes to social evolution in a tangible way. And the couple. I need to heal family patterns, balance the feminine and masculine, and rebuild the couple as a spiritual path. We all have the possibility of planting ourselves in the right territories. Hopefully we don't stay in a sterile place simply because of what we decided long ago. At first, I was envious of people who knew how to answer, "What are you going to do when you grow up?" Today, I'm grateful for taking the time to discover my true territories and all the journey that it took me on of Life Revision, the book I published, which includes having discovered so many things like my bones, my seeds, my winds, and my territories. And so this is my recipe for a succulent life. When we find the favorable conditions and we plant ourselves in the right territories, we can visualize the fruits, the legacy that we want to leave behind. Fruits are those achievements that don't feel empty, but fill us with joy, because they have the stamp of our identity. You can feel it. It's like when I released my first music album or published my book, it came out of my heart, of my gut. From there, the true role, the one that we must occupy, begins to become clear. Guided by our own dreams and not borrowed dreams, nor the product of the undertow. This is equivalent to clarifying our life project. Some days ago, I heard a friend saying that people who have a clear life project, who do not have a clear life project are not so collaborative. It is not so pleasant to work with them. We have all worked with people like that. You could say that these people are of two kinds. Some are like zombies. They do the least possible and complain about everything, and they rarely completing some tasks and are surviving. And then others are like vampires, trying to get the biggest cut for themselves, destroying ties and wreaking havoc along the way. But we know that life is more than that. When you have a clear life project, you want to collaborate with others and give your best. You take care of relationships because you know that nothing is achieved on your own. A fruit that I visualize for you and for me is a succulent life. Imagine eating a succulent fruit. Juicy, nutritious, exquisite. Succulence has to do with having substance, like that fruit. Succulence is also authenticity, a connection with that which makes us unique, represented by the daemon, that vital being that is always consistent with his nature. It also has to do with resilience, surviving in hostile environments, environments of uncertainty and crisis, the ones that we're in right now. That's what the succulent plant does. It accumulates sap that sustains it in times of drought. A succulent life is an antidote to walking around like zombies, blindly following others, or as vampires, controlling and extracting the sap of others and the planet. The question is, how do we live a succulent life that feels juicy like that fruit? That every day you're driven by a vital and authentic force, that of the daemon. A life full of sap, full of substance to cope with the changes and the difficulties, and to guide you on your path. I would like to suggest a journey. Start by collecting your own bones. Value and appreciate what you have created yourself. Put it above everything you buy. Give it a dignified place in your life. Really, really value it. The author of Women Who Run with the Wolves, Clarissa Pinkola Estes, speaks of the handmade life. Recover your forgotten parts as I recovered my music. Continue with collecting your seeds or stories that represent you. Remember them, retell them. Remind others of their stories in difficult times so that they remember who they are, like the Babemba tribe. Tune in to the winds or ideals that guide your life. Put yourself at the service of greater causes. And then plant yourself in territories. Feel that rootedness, that belonging that fills you with motivation to contribute, where you will flourish and prosper, providing succulent fruits for others. And of course, visualize your fruits. Life is succulent if we give birth to it. And we give birth to it from the creative force that we all have. We give birth to it from our imagination, with a new language full of symbols that brings us closer to nature, which opens us to the mystery. Because life is a great mystery that cannot be grasped. And as we give birth to this succulent life in tune with all that surrounds us, so we can, whatever comes from our symbolic womb harmonizes with the symphony of life. And I leave you with this song.
Te pido recomenzar, te pido volver a amar, te pido abrirte más a tu verdad, te pido. Hey yo, hey yo, hey. Hey yo, hey yo, hey, ahia, ahia. Hey yo, hey yo, hey. Muchas gracias.